Hi, it's Brandi, and welcome to a very special edition of Brand New Bold. Not only are we celebrating Father's Day, but we're kicking off part one of a three-part mini-series in this Black body. Today, I am joined by two of the most amazing fathers that I know, my dad and my granddaddy, and I'm so excited to have them here. So hello, guys.
Hello.
How you doing, sweetie?
Good. So let's jump right into it. So tell me about yourselves. What are your interests? Who are you today? Let us know.
I'm 85 years old, and I can't complain about anything. I've had, I've got two wonderful children. Had a wonderful growing up in a housing court project in Buffalo, New York, but it was like a village to me. A wonderful, wonderful village. Wonderful mother and sister. My father died when I was very young, but I had a lot of surrogates that were coming out of the Second World War that lived in that housing project. It was a brand new place. And so for that reason, I had a lot of wonderful tutors and people who led me along the way. Not the least of them was my mother and my sister. This might sound kind of crazy to you guys, but I can't ever remember hearing one argument in my whole life at 125B Willard Park Court. At any rate, it was just it's been a wonderful life, and my children and my wife have made it all the better, and then the grandkids are the icing on top. And not to speak of my son-in-law, but it's been an interesting life. We've moved around 2-3 times around the country. We've done quite a bit of traveling, and I think traveling was the thing that really, really gave me my best education. But I love jazz, I love sports, and ordinarily I like politics. My interest right now, I'm retired from a large company with 32 years of service, and I love sports, art, you name it. I've always been interested in all things about this whole entire earth.
Definitely a Renaissance man, I would say.
Well, I know I'm interested, and I've always been interested, and maybe even nosy.
Daddy, what about you?
I grew up in an apartment complex in Southeast DC. And like Granddaddy, for a long time, it was just me, my mother, and my sister. And just a wonderful experience with the three of us. When my mother and my father divorced, I was very young, but I never felt the I guess the sting of that. Maybe I was too young to understand what went on there. And my mother eventually remarried to a wonderful man. But growing up, when we moved to another part of DC, and our families joined, my mother and my stepfather, just wonderful stepbrothers and sisters. And just, we lived in a neighborhood where there were a lot of kids. And so I had a lot of friends, and we'd play football in the streets and just watch the girls jump double dutch and so on and so forth. And just a really fun time. As far as interests are concerned, well, I'm a tennis coach. I've been playing tennis since I was 10 years old. My mother put me in a tennis camp, partly to have something for me to do, to babysit a little bit for her, because she had to work during the summers. But I fell in love with it, and it just continued on. But I love sports. Like Granddaddy said, I love sports. I love football. Shout out to the Chiefs. That's right.
Super Bowl champs,
Bowl
just
champ.
saying.
There you go.
Don't forget the Buffalo Bills.
I love music. You know, I try to write lots of music, and I'm a very 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 average guitar player. You know, kind of self-taught with that, but I enjoy that immensely. It's a it's a it's a soothing thing about writing and playing that guitar that has really served me well. So I really enjoy that. I love to cook, as my waistline would attest to. Uh, but like I said, just a regular guy. Loves his family, loves his wife and his daughters, uh, his mother immensely, brothers, sisters, in-laws. You know, just truly blessed. I'm a truly blessed man to have so much love in my life.
Hear, hear.
So I kind of want to actually go into that a little bit further. So obviously at one point in your lives, you were both Black boys who grew up to be Black men, and you're now Black fathers. So what does being a Black father mean to you right now?
One of the most proudest things I am of, or one of the most proudest things that I have accomplished, I think, is just being a good father. I have two beautiful, wonderful, intelligent daughters, and I can't think of anything that makes me more proud than to see the people that they have become. So that I would say that now is just the highlight of my fatherhood. Okay.
What about you, Granddaddy?
Well, being a father has always meant to me being there. I've always wanted to make sure that I was there, whether they needed me or not. I just wanted to always be there and make sure that they knew that I was there, to have that solid grounding, to know that there was a male figure in their life that cared very, very deeply, and they didn't have to go to any place, anywhere else to get anything else. When you couldn't get it, come to daddy. Damn sure, try and do it.
Absolutely.
So it's always basically about trying to be grounded so that they would be grounded.
I think you did a great job of that, honestly, both of you. And I want to shift gears here a little bit. So Granddaddy, you grew up in the 40s. Daddy, you grew up in the 60s. And as we can see now, you know, history is repeating itself in that Black men are still, you know, a target for the police. So what does it feel like, you know, what's it like to be a Black man in 2020 still fighting some of the same battles you were fighting all those years ago? Granddaddy, you want to start?
Sure. I had some negative experiences growing up as a kid with police. The town I grew up in was a very segregated town. Buffalo, New York, as quiet as it's kept, was a very segregated town, and most of the cops, like 99% of them, were white, and they could be a big pain, but I was fortunate enough to have been born in an era when a lot of young men were coming back from the Second World War, and they were my mentors, and they taught me they taught me an awful lot about life in terms of dealing with other men, and that helped me deal with the police too. And I was always the kind of a person that never wanted to shame my mother. I would rather have died than to shame my mother. So I was always sort of a withdrawn kid when it came. I always knew what to do under most circumstances. grew up in a very multicultural town, and I knew how to handle myself in terms of it. Most of us did at that time, but it could have been a lot worse. I did see the police do some terrible things, not to any of my friends, but I have seen a policeman take his baton and just beat the brains out of a young man. And I've seen the police do some terrible other things. They snatched me a couple times when unwarranted. When I came out of a soda shop, my friend and I, Uncle Charlie Ellen, and we came out and they grabbed us and threw us against a car. We had done nothing. We had been in there getting a milkshake. And my first thought came to mind was, I hope to God my mother rather, doesn't see this, because I wasn't married yet. I was just a kid. I was about 16. Just hope she doesn't see it, because I knew what it looked like. But we hadn't done anything. But anyway, it was nasty. Basically, I think it's worse now than it was when I was a kid.
Oh wow. Daddy, what about you?
I would almost agree with that. I think it's worse now than it was when I was a kid. And to be honest, I really didn't have any run-ins with the police. As you mentioned, I grew up in the '60s, which was a turbulent time. I do remember when we lived in Parklands, the National Guard used to have to walk us to school because there was riots and so on and so forth. They burned down the little shopping center around the corner from my house. So that was a little traumatic. But as far as any type of interaction with the police, I really didn't have that. I really didn't have it at all. I mean, I was blessed in that regard. And really none of my friends, the guys that I hung out with, we didn't have that either. So in that regard, I was blessed. It doesn't mean though that I didn't hear about it and know if that came along, kind of what to do. And just talking to people, you just knew, people, your friends, and a lot of my friends' parents, knew us. So when you would get into a conversation like that, they would always say, yeah, you need to do this, 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 and this, that type of thing. But fortunately, none of us really had to go through any of that. So once again, I would agree with Granddaddy. Now I think it's worse. It's blatant. It's out there, and it's just ugly.
Yeah, and I think I would add on to that now everything is not only available on TV but on social media. So you're seeing things happen as they're happening in real time,
Yeah.
And so it's like, if you're just scrolling on your Twitter feed or whatever, you can't really, it's possible that you accidentally see someone getting killed on social media on accident, So I obviously I can't, relate to what it was like back then, but I would agree that it seems worse now because of how we can't really filter out any of it,
Almost like it doesn't mean that it didn't happen then.
Right.
But you just
see it as much. No question.
You just didn't see it as much as unless you were there, you didn't see it as much as you do now. Now, you can be on the East Coast and see what's happening on the West Coast. Right. Whereas before, if you weren't there, you may not know. You may not have seen it.
Right. But one thing we can say that, we did see in real time and on social media was a Black man becoming president. So Granddaddy, share what that was like for you, was that something that you ever thought you would see in your lifetime?
It's not like I didn't expect it to happen, but when it did happen, when I thought our first Black president would be Cory Booker. Oh, and I had never heard of Barack Obama until it seems like he just popped up. And the first time I heard him, I got chills. And I told Myra, I says, that's it. I think that he'll be it. There's just something about him. And to today, if you come into my house, as you probably know, there's too much Barack Obama around. I got books and stuff like that, and about Michelle Obama too. But it wasn't like a dream come true, baby. It was just a fight well fought and the deserved thing that happened. And I was so proud to be able to talk about him and talk to other people, white people in particular, about him and hear them talk about the things that he was doing. And it was just like a dream come true. I always thought there would be. Because like I said, I grew up with a bunch of pretty erudite young people, and I knew it had to happen. Thank God it happened.
Right. Thank God. And you know what? I think that he was someone who, you know, us as Black people could feel very proud of. You know, he was very articulate. He knows what he's doing. He hasn't been involved in any scandals. He, you know, kind of was like the perfect candidate, you know. I want to switch gears here a little bit because, you know, he is someone that came off to me as very, you know, mentally strong. And Black people in general, you know, have always had to be so strong, especially Black men. But, you know, now we live in a society where, you know, more people have become open-minded towards focusing on their mental health and therapy and things like that. But it is still kind of a bit of a taboo amongst Black men. So have either of you guys ever taken, you know, time to focus on your mental health? And if not, do you regret not doing so? So Daddy, we'll start off with you for this question.
To be honest, no, I haven't. I think one of the things that I've done is, you know, once again, I'll go back to the whole music. I mean, I was just so into music, all different types of music, growing up, that, you know, whenever I felt sad or something like that, I would put on some music and then I'd start writing. And so I'd pull out the pen and the pad and just start putting it down that way. And most of the things that I've written about are love, you know, that type of thing. Because, you know, that subject matter is just soothing, you know. So obviously I was looking for something to soothe whatever, you know, and it could have been, you know, who knows? I mean, who knows what it could have been. But as far as, you know, really going to talk to someone or something to that effect, no, I didn't. I'm someone who I get pleasure from seeing other people happy and doing things to make others happy. And sometimes that can wear on you a little bit, but I mean, that's just who I am. That's my makeup. I've been this way my whole life. And, you know, so that brings me joy, trying to bring joy to others. But as far as my mental health, I mean, I'm crazy, but but
aren't we all a little crazy?
You know, I've never really tried to delve into it that much.
Granddaddy?
Well, you know, to tell you the truth, I was very, very lucky in that I was able to retire fairly early. And I went back to school and I started studying drug rehabilitation. And in drug rehabilitation, there's tons and tons of psych. And I really, 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 really enjoyed it. In fact, it's one of my biggest regrets, other than not having learned how to play the piano, was one of the things that I hadn't done that earlier. But I got associated with my abnormal psychology professor, and we became great friends. And I started helping because of my experience, having retired early. He asked me to help out at some of the centers, including the penitentiaries and that. And I naturally had to read a lot of psychiatry. And cognitive psychiatry is what my favorite form of psychiatry is. And that it makes you very much aware of who you are cognitive psychiatry. And I was fortunate enough to study that, and I till today I read quite a bit of it, and and it still helps me grow as a man. But I just wish that I had taken it a lot earlier. So I sort of, but we used to have back and forths in giving those classes. They in themselves were psychiatry type classes because you had to be totally truthful with the people that you were working with. A lot of very, very intelligent people, drug addicts I met, and and it taught me a lot more about myself than I ever thought I'd ever know. So I have dug into me a little bit. I wish I had been able to do it a lot earlier.
Yeah. So let's talk about that a little bit more. Why do you think it is such, taboo for Black men to go to therapy if they need it?
I don't. I think like I said, I think it's the best. It could be the best thing in the world. And if there's a lot of young people when they do go to jail, because we went to the Nebraska penitentiary and we used to have lessons there, and I call them lessons. It was sessions actually. We'd all sit around and you had to be true, and they would just tell the pat down truth to one another, and they could tell when each other was not being on key. They really taught me an awfully lot, and I never was afraid of self discovery. I just, and I do it more. The older I got, the more I did it, and I would advise any young man, any old man, any human being, is to try to psychologically discover yourself.
Daddy, do you have anything to add to that?
You know, I don't know. That's a good question. I'm not sure why many Black men haven't delved into that. One of the things, as Granddaddy was speaking, I thought about, in the circle of friends that I had, I mean, nothing was off limits in terms of what we could talk about. And, we may have joked about it, or we used to call it joning on each other, where, you were, well, you know what I mean, we were joning. and maybe that in a little bit was a form, a very archaic form, but a form nonetheless of that, because we did talk about things that may have been on your mind, so to have that close knit with your buddies was cool. So that may have been partly why, at least from my perspective, or me personally, why I didn't go that route. But I would agree, if there's an opportunity for someone who's really struggling with something to do that, it is so much more acceptable now, and highly recommend doing it.
Yeah, and I think especially during a time like right now where the world is just so chaotic, there's news that we have to process every single day, every single hour, if you're sitting by the TV or what have you.
No question.
Yeah, so that's a good point. But just to piggyback off of that, what are some things that you have heard about, some stereotypes that you might have heard of Black people or of Black men that make you sad?
Some of the things that I've learned, not just through helping some young people through drug rehabilitation, but just seeing, we have to be, I want them to make sure that they're more sure of themselves and ask questions. That was one thing that that stood me in very good stead coming along. I always ask questions. I used to shine shoes and run groceries, and wherever I'd be on the street, I'd see something different. How'd you do that? How do you do that? And the movies, I was always a movie addict, like most kids are, but I used to always like all of these foreign places. And everybody say, when you get older, where do you think the first place you want to go? I said, I want to go to Hong Kong because it just seemed so, and that was one of the first places I did go overseas. But travel in and of itself was such a wonderful thing. And I don't mean to get off subject, but anyway, it I think a lot of my self-discovery, and I think a lot of these young men, their self-discovery would could would do them well if they ask. Don't be afraid to ask questions about anything without embarrassing people, I'm saying, but ask questions and find out about what you can do. Don't worry about what you can't do. You've got to find out what you can do first.
Look at you dropping gems, granddaddy. Daddy.
You know, I think one of the stereotypes that I know is coming is just getting the holes punched in it like Swiss cheese. Is just the lack of intelligence of black men, but not just black men, of black people. You know, society for as long as all of us can remember has not thought that we were mentally capable of the things that we are. And I would argue that we've had to be even more mentally capable because we've had to do it our way and their way to just get the same. So I think that's probably the biggest, and a little bit of what Granddaddy said. You know, a stereotype that we wouldn't want the same opportunities and the same we wouldn't have the same dreams that uh, people non people of color would have. I mean, it's just why do you think I wouldn't want to go to Hong Kong? You
Right.
know, why would
Exactly.
you think that I wouldn't uh, want the best of the best? Why wouldn't I want to take my wife to, you know, the finest restaurant in the land? I mean, so we've had to fight those stereotypes as well. I want the exact same things for myself and my family that you may want for your family. And
Yeah.
you know, I think that for a long time that's been a thing that we've been looked at as not having those same goals and dreams and aspirations.
If I could, I'd just like to add this one little bit. I would please, you young sisters are doing it to death. My young brothers, get your education and stop moaning and tagging on. And when your girlfriend does get an education, taking advantage of her because she's got the better job. Get your education.
Yeah, I agree. So let's talk about some next steps here, right? So although we've seen a lot of negativity with, you know, the recent murders of Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, many others, you know, what are some things that have motivated you to get involved with the Black Lives Matter movement in general?
Well, ever since I can remember, I have been, me and your grandmother, you know, I should say your grandmother and I, we've been involved from way back. We were involved with a group through the Mennonites, whereby we would go in as a couple and try to buy a house, and then a white couple would come behind us and they'd find out the results and all that. I mean, it's as far back as that, but even before that, I was in the Urban League. I've been part of the Urban League was headquarters in a building where I used to. There was a where we used to go and play basketball and stuff. At any rate, I made sure that I stayed tuned. I've always read a lot of Black history. I've always asked a lot of questions. The only person that I didn't ask an awful lot of questions because I knew it would be kind of hurtful was my mother, although she experienced it because she was raised on a farm in South Carolina as basically not a slave, but you know, I can't think of the term right now. But at any rate, pardon?
A sharecropper?
Sharecropper. And I asked her very few questions about her experience there. And the only thing she used to tell me was, don't ever go back down there. She lived, that was in Greenwood, South Carolina. It's a wonderful, lovely little town now, but they had some terrible experiences. And my father, he took off and he came up to Buffalo. And I met a couple of my older cousins told me about some of the things that had happened to them. But it's just something that all of us should be aware of. And when we not just help just Black people, I've always been into helping white people, Black people, good people. You know, you got to be a good person, and then you got my ticket. But I would say to young folks now, you know, my God, just don't let anybody, you know, punch a hole in your boat.
Yeah. So, what do you want people who don't belong to the Black community to see when they look at you, Daddy?
I want them to see somebody just like them, a human being. I'm not asking for anything more. I don't want to take more than I've earned. But at the same time, I mean, I want the same opportunities. I want the same I want the same things for my family that they would want. You know, I think we get this once again this stereotype that we're wanting more than anybody else, and it's not like that. I mean, it's you want the best you can get for yourself and your family, and that's what I want. I don't want to be treated any differently than anybody else. You know, my mother a long time ago told me, you treat people the way you want to be treated. And that mantra has just lived within me my whole life, and will until the day I leave this earth. And so that's where I come from. And to kind of piggyback off of what Granddaddy just said, it's not just Black people. It's Black, white, whoever it is, Asian, whoever. You treat people like you want to be treated. We're all part of the human race. We're all part of the human race. So I guess that's where I come. That's the angle I come from with.
If I might just add just this, I always found it a huge advantage because of just taking it for granted that a white person didn't like me or thought I had less intellect than them, because I took that and found out exactly where they were coming from, and I could get up over through them very easily in that way, in vying for jobs and in fact, that's how I got one of my best jobs was, this gentleman had gotten out of the Marines, and he was interviewing me for a job in a plant, and I could tell that he's a straight shooter. And so everything he asked me, I just answered him very direct, and I would follow it up with, you'll find me very direct, and I'll always ask questions. So right now, you probably want to ask me thus and such, and I would he said, "What you doing? Picking my brain?" You know. But it's always just been that way, baby.
Yeah. And one of the things that you mentioned, Daddy, was that we want to be treated just like everyone else. We want to have the same rights as everyone else.
No
And
question.
to me, we also want to experience joy like everyone else. And there's this phrase that I absolutely love, and it's called Black boy joy. And it makes me think of, Black boys and Black men just laughing and smiling and feeling free. So what are some ways that both of you could achieve your own version of Black boy joy?
I always start with educating, reading, asking questions, and discovery is my joy. And seeing what the two kids that I'm going to leave on this earth, how wonderful they turned out, and the grandkids naturally. But that's what makes me happy, seeing their discoveries and their steps forward and just being the people that they are. I get a great deal of joy out of that.
Daddy?
My family, seeing them happy. I've got an absolutely wonderful wife, and when I can do things to bring a smile to her face, I think I may get more out of it than she does. and then for my kids, my daughters, just watching them become the young ladies, the beautiful young ladies that they've become. That's my little boy joy, or
Black boy joy.
black boy.
I never heard that expression
joy.
before.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that I love, and just happiness. Happiness brings me joy, and just always striving for that. And there are multiple things that can bring you happiness, but that I would say that.
Yeah. Well, we're about to wrap up here, but I have one last question for both of you. So, what do you love about being in a Black body?
Well, I've never even thought about it, baby. What I have thought about is always wanting to be in a healthy body, and basically, but I've never thought about it in terms of uh, being Black. I just thought about the thought process that I had about life, and I was happy that I did have it because it was always positive. And I think more about the Black brain than the Black body is what
Well,
I'm
it's
happy about.
included.
My Black brain, because I enjoy all things Black.
Daddy.
I think the diversity of talents that are uh, in our Black bodies. I mean, uh, the intellectual side, the spiritual side, the soulful side. You look at social media today, and you can just tell that non-blacks have a bit of I don't want to say intimidation. There's a little bit of jealousy for all of the different things that we as Black people can do, and when they allow us to achieve, or stop trying to put roadblocks in front of us to achieve, and they see the things that we're capable of, not just being able to catch a football or shoot a ball through a hoop, but to become president of the United States, to win Nobel prizes, whatever it is. That diversity of us as a people is just is what's cool to me.
To adventure into a podcast.
Exactly.
Well, that will do it for us today. I want to thank you both so much for not only sharing your stories with me, but with the listeners, because there were some things today that I, had no idea about either of you. And I realized how difficult conversations like this are. And so I'm very grateful that you guys both joined me today. So
I'm
I
so
love you
proud
both.
of you, baby.
You made it easy. You made it easy.
I'm so proud of you. And you know I love all you guys.
Oh, I love you both so much.
Well.
Till next time. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.